What's going on, everybody? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Motorola Moto G Power 2022. Now, as the name implies, this phone is the successor of last year's version of the Motorola Moto G Power, the Moto G Power 2021. So in this video, we're going to be going over some of the specs and features of this phone to help you decide whether or not it's the right one for you. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. But with that being said, let's get started. So this phone has a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of around 79.7%. Now, technically, according to the screen-to-body ratio itself, the bezels are a little bit on the thicker side, but I honestly don't really notice it. I think they look decently thin, and overall, the display does look pretty good. Even though it's only 720p, the image is decently sharp and crisp for what it is. And I do have the brightness at 100% right now, and I would say the display does look pretty good. The colors look pretty bright, and overall, combined with the actual size of the display itself at 6.5 inches, I think this phone is going to be pretty good for content consumption. To add to this, we do have a 90Hz refresh rate, which is going to make the movement on the screen a little bit faster and smoother. You can't really tell through the video, or maybe you can a little bit. It is a really subtle difference, but it is a difference all the same. And if you're doing lots of content consumption, like streaming videos, playing games, that sort of thing, where there's a lot of movement on the screen, you are going to notice a difference. Now up here, we got a hole punch for the front-facing camera, and it really looks nice and clean. I can definitely appreciate the hole punch front-facing camera because there are lots of phones in this price range that have water drop notches instead, and in my opinion, water drop notches really just don't look nearly as good. And as far as the actual quality itself, this camera is 8 megapixels, so not bad at all. Now for storage with this phone, we're getting 64 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so that is definitely pretty impressive. If I can remember right, the 2021 version of the Moto G Power did have a 32 gigabyte variant, and as far as I know, there's not currently a 32 gigabyte variant of the Moto G Power 2022. This is the only variant I know of as of right now, and this phone does have 64 gigabytes. So that's definitely a nice step up. Not to say that the older version of this phone didn't have a 64 gigabyte variant, because it did, but it looks like here we're not getting the 32 gigabyte variant anymore, which I'm happy about because in this day and age, 32 gigabytes is definitely not enough storage in my opinion. Even if you're just a normal user who doesn't do a ton on your phone, you're probably going to go through 32 gigabytes pretty quickly, whereas with 64, you definitely have more space to work with. Now, if you're more of a power user, if you're putting lots of stuff on your phone, especially photos and videos, the microSD card expansion is really going to help out with this because, of course, you can expand your storage a lot more with that. Now, there's no wireless charging with this phone, which is not really a big surprise, but if you are looking for a feature like that, unfortunately, this phone doesn't have it. But with that being said, we do have some good security options here with both face unlock and a fingerprint scanner right here on the back. Now that's another difference I noticed. The Moto G Power 2021 actually had the fingerprint scanner on the power key. Now I'm not personally too concerned about this. I know some people do like the fingerprint scanner on the power key a little bit better. It seems to be pretty popular, but I personally don't really care either way. I'm just glad that the phone has a fingerprint scanner and it works really well. But just to give you an idea of how this fingerprint scanner works, let's go ahead and give it a try so you can see for yourself. There we go, one more time. And there we go. As you can see, this fingerprint scanner is real fast and responsive, no issues here. So taking a look at the rear camera setup, we got a triple camera here with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. So not a bad setup at all. With the 50 megapixel main camera, you're definitely going to be getting some nice photos. If you want to take some nice photos for social media or something like that. Now, one thing it's missing is an ultra wide camera. In 2021, they did get rid of that feature with the Moto G Power because the Moto G Power 2020 actually did have one, but unfortunately, Motorola got rid of that feature with the Moto G Power 2021. I was honestly kind of hoping that they'd bring it back, but unfortunately we're not seeing that yet, maybe next year. But regardless, I am pretty happy overall with this phone's camera setup. To give you an idea of what this phone can do camera-wise, Here's a photo taken with the main camera. This was taken right at the beginning of a sunset and it captured those colors really well. I am pretty impressed. The lighting could have been captured a little bit better. I've definitely seen phones in this price range that take brighter photos, but overall it's really not bad. The details look really good. So again, if you're trying to take some more casual photos for social media or something like that, then this phone is gonna work out pretty well. Now this is a photo taken with portrait mode. I am impressed with this one as well. In fact, I've actually seen several phones that are more in the mid-range, definitely more expensive than this one. They don't blend the subject with the background nearly as well, so I am impressed. The background is blurred appropriately, and everything does look really nice. But once again with the lighting, I do think it could have been captured quite a bit better. But I will say overall for what it is, this phone definitely does have a pretty good camera setup. The only thing that I really wish it had is again the ultra wide camera. I don't know why they took that feature away between 2020 and 2021. That really is too bad. And I really had my fingers crossed that they bring it back this year, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So again, maybe next year. But as it is, this camera setup isn't bad. Now for video, we can shoot in a max quality up to 1080p in both the rear and front cameras. So no 4K or anything like that. Really not very surprising considering this is a more entry-level phone. It's not even a 5G phone for that matter, so you really can't expect a whole lot, but I would say the video quality is still going to be pretty decent. Now internally, this phone is getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G37 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on the phone, and it came back with a single core score of 183 and a multi-core score of 1027. Now these results aren't really super meaningful unless you have something to compare them to, so I would suggest running a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on your current device and comparing it to these to see if it would actually be an upgrade, because it may or may not be. But I will say I haven't had any performance issues with this phone. Granted, I haven't really done a whole lot with it, but so far I have been using this phone a little bit for more light activities like browsing the web, going on social media, that sort of thing, and I haven't had any issues so far. It's run decently smoothly. Now of course, if you're going to be on your phone a lot, then you might want to look at a device with a little bit more processing power, because although for the most part this phone does run pretty smoothly, you are probably going to notice that it's not the fastest phone out there. If you're constantly on your phone doing things like social media, especially with apps like Instagram and TikTok, where there's lots of graphics heavy stuff going on, that's a situation where despite this phone running decently smoothly for the most part, it might run a little rough if you're doing that kind of thing constantly. Mobile gaming is another one, namely those more high-end graphics heavy games. If you're doing something like Angry Birds, I seriously doubt this phone is going to have an issue there. But I would say for more basic activities like browsing the web, more light social media use, streaming videos, sending text messages, making calls, all the normal things you would be doing with a smartphone, this phone is going to be fine and it will get the job done. Now for the battery, that's where this phone gets real impressive, which is why it's called the Moto G Power. And this phone is getting a 5000 milliamp hour battery. So this is a pretty large battery. It's definitely going to last you a few days. And in most situations, unless you're really heavily using the phone without giving it a break, it's definitely going to last you a couple days at least. Now, in addition to having good battery life in general, this phone is also going to have lots more longevity than some other phones with smaller batteries, because with a 5000 milliamp hour battery, as the battery degrades, which all of them do, it's going to take this battery a little bit longer to degrade to the point where the battery life is really going to be affected because it's so much larger. So overall, whether you need to use your phone heavily throughout the day, but don't always have time to be around a charger, or you just want to get one phone and keep it for a long period of time without having to replace it, the large battery this phone has is going to be a huge asset to you either way. Now, unfortunately, this phone doesn't have NFC, and that's yet another feature that I was really hoping Motorola would add to the 2022 version of this phone, but unfortunately we're not seeing that here. So again, maybe next year we'll have to wait and see. Now, in case you don't know what it is, NFC is the technology behind contactless mobile payment services like Google Pay. So if you were hoping to be able to use Google Pay with this phone, unfortunately, that's not possible. So now that we've gone over some of the specs of the phone, let's take a closer look at the device itself. On the left side of the phone, we got the slot for the SIM card and the microSD card. Notice there's no assistant button here. And I don't know how long this has been around, but I just found out today that instead of pressing some annoying button, all you need to do to get to the assistant is go like this. I had no idea this whole time that that was even a thing. There's a pretty good chance that it's been a thing for a really long time and I just missed it because I personally don't really use the assistant at all. But I think that's really cool. In my opinion, that's how an assistant should be activated. None of these weird buttons on the side. But luckily, besides the slot for the SIM card and the micro SD card, there's really nothing going on this side of the phone. On the bottom here, we got our microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. On the right side of the phone, we got our volume keys and our power key. On the top of the phone, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack and the noise canceling microphone. On the back here, of course, we got our camera setup and our flash, the fingerprint scanner right here with a little Motorola logo inside. Now the back has this wavy texture that I personally really like. It does pick up some fingerprints, especially in this type of light, but it's not nearly as bad as a phone with a glossy finish. Those are usually the worst for fingerprints. So it's not nearly that bad, but maybe not quite as good as I would hope. Overall, as far as material goes, this phone doesn't feel cheap at all, but it definitely doesn't feel premium either. So keep that in mind if you're looking for a phone that feels more premium. Even in this price range, there are much better options out there. But in conclusion, my general thoughts about the Motorola Moto G Power 2022. There were definitely some features I was hoping to get with this phone that it doesn't have, so that's a little disappointing. But by itself, kind of ignoring my previous expectations, this is actually a pretty decent entry-level phone. The processor wasn't really impressive per se, but it's not half bad either. Definitely a lot better than some of the other phones in this price range. The display is also pretty nice. For the most part, it's pretty standard issue for an entry-level phone, but I do like that it has a 90Hz refresh rate. It makes it feel a little bit more premium when you're scrolling and stuff like that, and it gives you a slightly better experience with content consumption. And the colors and overall display itself are all pretty bright, so I can really appreciate that too. I'm pretty happy with the storage as well. Sure, 128 gigabytes of internal storage would have been even better, but being that this is a pretty entry-level device, I am still happy with 64. The fingerprint scanner is really nice. I don't know how you guys feel about it being moved from the power key to the back again, but I personally don't mind it. Overall, the camera setup, minus the fact that there's no ultra-wide camera, was pretty good as well. And of course, the battery that this phone is known for is still just as strong as it was in previous models. So in general, if you're looking for a well-rounded entry-level phone for basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web, and then content consumption like light gaming and streaming videos and stuff like that, then the Motorola Moto G Power 2022 is going to be a solid option. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and as always, I will see you in the next video.